I've installed LED lights in the engine room of my boat. For this, I took these so-called COB LED strips, which I would simply glue to some aluminum L profiles. All I had to do was to cut the strips to the right length, then solder a wire to them, then glue the L profiles to the boat with Sikaflex, and with that I have a simple and efficient lighting solution for my engine room. This will come in handy for the upcoming works we plan to do on the engine, and which I'm going to show you today. The main reason why we think that there's something wrong with the engine is that when you give it full throttle, there's this thick white smoke coming out the exhaust. This could have many causes, the most obvious being that the cylinder head gasket is damaged so that coolant fluid was able to get into the combustion chamber. So the plan for today is to open up the cylinder head and change the head gasket. First we need to drain the coolant liquid. Then we remove all the pipes, tubes and hoses that are attached to the cylinder head. Next we have to carefully remove the fuel line from the injector nozzles. After removing this coolant tank, the thermostat can also be removed. Of course, we need to detach the exhaust pipe, and then we can start disassembling the cylinder head itself by first removing the cylinder head cover. This reveals the rocker arm assembly, which we also need to remove. Next, we carefully remove the push rods, making sure to store them in the right order, so that later each rod goes back exactly where it came from. Now that all the nuts holding down the cylinder head are uncovered, we can start removing them. Because these nuts are so hard to break loose, I thought we could try with my impact wrench. Unfortunately, my shitty old compressor isn't powerful enough, so back to manual labor. And big kudos to my friend, by the way, who did all the hard work during this job. Now that all the nuts are removed, we should be able to simply slide the cylinder head off the bolts. But that wasn't the case, so we had to help it a little by gently jamming a flathead screwdriver into the crack between the two parts. We also added a couple of tension belts to help pull off the cylinder head. And we are aware that the motor is mostly made from cast iron, which could break if hit too harshly with the hammer. That's why we were especially careful on where to hit it and how hard. Very slowly, the crack started to widen between the motor block and the cylinder head. Along the way, we kept tightening the tension belts. At some point, we used this chisel. Clearly, we are making progress. Alright, now just a few more gentle hits and the cylinder head should come off. There we go. This cylinder head really didn't go without a fight. And just in case we haven't had enough trouble yet, thank you very much. We're gonna leave this here for later, because now we're gonna have a look at the motor block. At first glance it may look a bit rough and dirty, but as far as 50-year-old diesel engines are concerned, this one is actually in great condition. Now we can remove the old cylinder head gasket, which turned out to be in pretty good shape as well, so at this point we are not sure if this was the cause for the white smoke. Next we're gonna clean the motor block from any kind of oil and debris. Once again here, everything looks impeccable. There's no sign that water would have come into the cylinders. We only have a little soot deposition, which is completely normal for this kind of engines. By the way, it's these two rusty bolts that caused us so much trouble when trying to remove the cylinder head. We used a very finely grained sandpaper to remove the rust. Next, my friend would very gently scrape off the soot depositions around the cylinders. To finish off, we're gonna vacuum all the debris and clean the surfaces with acetone or brake cleaner. Next, we're gonna clean the cylinder head. Here we also have that soot deposition, which we're gonna remove with brake cleaner and a sponge. We use compressed air to remove any debris from behind the valves. We do the same on the other side, and then it's time to unpack the new head gasket. Let's carefully put it in place. And there you have it, good as new. The engine block is now ready to receive the cylinder head. So let's get it back down and then carefully put it back on top of the motor block. After making sure that it sits nice and flush, we start putting the nuts back on. For this, we can certainly use my pneumatic wrench to take some workload off my friend. Next, we have to check the manual to see in which order we have to tighten the nuts and also with how much torque to tighten them. In our case, it's 81 Newton meter. Next, we can put back the push rods. Here comes the rocker arm assembly, and since we put each push rod back on its original spot, we hope that we don't have to make any adjustments on the rocker arms. We make sure everything is properly aligned. Then put the nuts back and tighten those. We double check if everything works properly by manually rotating the camshaft. A fresh gasket for the cylinder head cover, and then the cylinder head on top. Next we put back the thermostat valve, but I first have to make a new gasket before putting the coolant tank back on top. I also took care of that leaking transmission oil. Believe it or not, all I had to do was to tighten the bolts at the bottom of the transmission. Next I filled up the coolant system with fresh coolant. While doing this, I have to open up different valves to allow the air to escape. And so, as soon as water starts coming out the valves, I can close them back down. Next I have to bleed the fuel line. For this I open up a bolt on the diesel filter. Then I manually pump diesel into the system until all the air has escaped. I repeat the same with each of the 4 injector valves, and then we are ready to fire her up. It usually takes a while before the diesel has managed to get all the way into the combustion chamber, so please bear with me. And there she is, back to life. Unfortunately, the issue with the white smoke remained the same. Nevertheless, it's time to take her for a test drive. I'm gonna add this diesel injection and system cleaner, which my friend strongly recommended to me. And so, here we go. The plan for this test drive is to keep the engine above 1000 RPM for the most time. First to see if the transmission oil remains in place at that engine speed, and then we're also gonna run it at full throttle for a few times to see how the engine behaves, and hopefully that we got rid of that white smoke. Well, the good news is the transmission oil didn't spill out. The bad news is, as you can see, that white smoke still comes out the back of the exhaust. So we lowered the engine speed back down and headed back to our base to see what we could do. At this point I thought about double checking the oil levels of the engine, which turned out to be a bit over full. So we removed some with the built-in hand pump until it was at a more acceptable level. This being the only thing we hadn't already done before, we went ahead for a second try. And see there, no more white smoke at full throttle. Now in the end, since we did everything at the same time, we don't really know if the cause for the white smoke was actually the head gasket, or if the injectors were dirty and that diesel injector and system cleaner had showed its effect, or if indeed it was just stupidly too much oil in the system. Anyway, I'm happy that the engine is fixed and hope that it will last for a while. And with that, I say goodbye, and I hope to see you in the next video.